People always imagine international conflicts as big, dramatic battles, tanks, soldiers, bombs. But what if we told you that one of the strangest and pettiest wars in modern history was not fought over land or oil or gold? It was fought over fish. And not just any fish, cheap cod fish. Britain and Iceland once went head-to-head in a bitter, funny standoff that involved warships, screaming diplomats, and a series of confrontations that lasted for over 20 years. All because Iceland said, "Leave our fish alone," and Britain said, "We absolutely will not." This is the story of the European pettiest war. It all started after World War II. Britain was rebuilding its economy, and fish was a major part of the British diet. Cod was cheap. Cod was everywhere. And British trawlers had fished Icelandic waters for generations. Meanwhile, Iceland was small, newly independent, and its biggest natural resource was the sea. Iceland had no armies, no big economy, no powerful industries, just fish. So Iceland made a decision. If the sea was all they had, they would protect it with everything. In 1952, Iceland extended its fishing zone from 3 miles to 4 miles. British fishermen were furious, but they complied. Then Iceland pushed again. In 1958, it extended the zone to 12 miles. And that was when the first Cod Wars started. British trawlers went fishing near Iceland, but the Icelandic patrol boats swooped in to chase them out. So Britain responded by sending Royal Navy warships to escort the fishing boats. Imagine the scene. Icelandic coast guards in small vessels circling giant British frigates and trawlers, dragging nets while warships tried to shield them like bodyguards. Chaotic but funny, right? Well, Europe watched, confused. The world laughed, but for both countries it was serious business. The first conflict ended when Britain agreed to the 12-mile limit. But Iceland was not done. In 1972, Iceland extended its zone again, this time to 50 miles. When the British trawlers returned to fish, Icelandic patrol boats physically cut their nets. They rammed British boats. Crewmen on both sides shouted through loudspeakers across icy waters. It was wild. Britain decided they had had enough, so they sent more warships. But Iceland refused to back down. This led to a second conflict. At some point, this series of confrontations became a humiliating diplomatic headache. But Iceland wants what it wants. They even threatened to shut down a NATO base that the United States relied on if the British didn't give in. This threat sent Washington into panic mode, and America decided to step in. America told Britain to chill, and Britain reluctantly chilled. But Iceland was not done. They pushed one last time. In 1975, they extended the fishing zone to 200 miles. That sparked the third and most intense conflict. This time, Icelandic patrol boats clashed with British warships in the cold North Atlantic. There were more than 50 ramming incidents. Boats were damaged. Fishermen feared for their lives, for something as simple as access to cod. The British weren't having it anymore, but this time Iceland had leverage, so they couldn't do much. What was the leverage? They threatened to leave NATO entirely. Iceland controlled a key NATO location during the Cold War. If they walked away from NATO out of anger, the Soviet Union would move in. Western countries pressured Britain, and Britain had no choice but to finally back down. In 1976, Britain recognized Iceland's 200-mile exclusive fishing zone, and just like that, centuries of British fishing dominance ended. This series of conflicts became known as the Cod Wars. The aftermath was bitter on Britain's side. British fishing towns collapsed, jobs vanished, an entire industry shrank forever. In Iceland, it was the opposite. The victory protected their waters and helped build a modern fishing economy that still supports the country today. And that was the Cod Wars, a fight with no tanks, no soldiers, and no gunfire. Just stubborn pride, cold seas, damaged ships, and the belief that a nation could defend its only resource with everything it had. Iceland, a tiny island that barely had a navy, stood up to one of the world's greatest naval powers and won 3 times. All because of fish and chips. And that is how one of the strangest conflicts in history proved that sometimes the smallest nations fight the hardest when they have nothing else to lose.